Hello dear students, welcome to my class on Wordsworth's poem, Lines Written in Early Spring. Now before we attempt a study of any literary work, it is important to have at least some idea about the personal life of the writer and also the period in which he lived and wrote his works. William Wordsworth, he is a well-known name in English literature. He is not even a writer who needs an introduction, does he? I'm sure you have all studied at least some of his poems in your lower classes. The poem Daffodils, it is still a hot favorite among students participating in recitation competitions. So he was a romantic writer. In fact, when I say that he is a romantic writer, I would like to tell you that if we trace the history of English literature, you can see that it has passed through several phases with certain distinctive characteristic traits. These phases are called ages or periods. So each period has its own specific features. The Romantic period to which William Wordsworth belonged is roughly the period between 1785 and 1832. In fact, it is a publication of the work Lyrical Ballads. Lyrical Ballads, it's a collection of poems jointly written by William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge. So it is the year of the publication of the Lyrical Ballads, that is the year 1798, that marks the beginning, the official beginning of the literary movement called the Romantic period. Therefore, the Lyrical Ballads, it is considered the landmark of English Romanticism. And you know what Romanticism means? Romantic poetry in English. Before we go into the features of Romantic poetry, I would just like to tell you that Romantic poetry in English has again been divided into two, distinguished by two generations of poets. William Wordsworth, Samuel Coleridge, and Robert Southey belonged to the first generation of Romantic poets. Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats, they belonged to the second generation of Romantic poets. Now, the Romantic age is probably the most prolific or the most productive of all literary periods. It was the age of revolutionary change, and this change, it came about not only in the character and function of poetry, but in the whole conception of the nature of man and of the world in which he lived. In Romanticism, a lot of importance was given to the poet's personal feelings and also his freedom of expression. For the Romantics, literature must reflect all that is spontaneous and unrestricted. They wanted to follow their own rules, and they gave more emphasis or importance on individuality and personal freedom. Now, coming to the features of the Romantic movement in Wordsworth's poetry, I would like to begin with his profound love for nature. We all know Wordsworth as a nature poet, don't we? Wordsworth, he presented nature. Why is he called a nature poet? Because in many of his poems, he has presented nature as having a religious, spiritual, mystic, and even symbolic significance. And he had great faith in the innate goodness of man. These are the features of the Romantic poet. And now we are discussing the romantic features present in Wordsworth's poetry. So he had a great faith in the innate goodness of man. he wanted to celebrate the magnificence of childhood in his poems. Have you heard the famous line, "Child is the father of man"? This line belongs to none other than William Wordsworth. And he was interested in the rustic or pastoral life, and he wrote poems in celebration of simple lives of ordinary people. He preferred to talk about ordinary people, and he also wanted to promote the ideals of universal brotherhood. And he believed in, because he liked to talk about ordinary people and simple life, he also believed in using simple common language that everybody can understand. If you read Wordsworth's poem, it is you will not encounter any great difficulty in appreciating and understanding and in enjoying his poems, because he used very simple language which can be easily understood by all. And then each of his works are an examination of the poet's inner feelings, and there is emphasis on lyricism. Lyricism is actually an expression of emotion. They were all extremely emotional people, the romantic writers, and like most romantics, Wordsworth also liked to capture emotions in verse. And then there is also this emphasis on the supernatural. All romantic poets, they were all fond of including spiritual or supernatural elements, magic, folk tales. You would come across all these supernatural elements in their works. And they also had a special interest in the past, particularly the Middle Ages. And it is also said that they were all escapist. In fact, even their love for nature or their love of the past or love of the supernatural, they're all part of this escapist tendency. They did not want to live in the present. They wanted to escape somewhere. So a poet of the Romantic movement, Wordsworth is a celebrated worshipper of nature, and he was also a poet of humanity. As I told you earlier, all romantic writers, they believed, they had great faith in the innate goodness of man. Wordsworth, he was a prophet of nature. Now, if you are asked to name any nature poet, I'm sure that the first name that would spring to anyone's mind would definitely be that of William Wordsworth. So no wonder he's called a prophet of nature. So he was a prophet of nature in the sense that he did not just gaze in awe at her beauty, but also at the divine glory of nature. He was concerned, Wordsworth was concerned with the spiritual underlying the various physical manifestations of nature. And each experience was to him a moment of spiritual consecration. About the poem, Lines Written in Early Spring, it is basically a landscape poem, a poem that is largely concerned with nature. The poem was written in 1798, and it was published in Wordsworth's and Coleridge's work, Lyrical Ballads. You remember Lyrical Ballads? It's a publication of this collection in the year 1798 that marked the beginning of the Romantic period. So in this poem, you have an unnamed speaker, who is very likely the poet himself. It's more like a monologue. You have one person, the speaker there, and he is reclining, lying down in a beautiful grove on a spring morning, and then he is reflecting on the changes that have come about in the society, in the world. So it's a poem on the harmony of nature, but then it is also a poem on humanity's failure to follow nature's peaceful example. So it registers the poet's disappointment that man could not follow nature's example. So when he is in communion with nature, all he feels is peace and consolation. He believed in the healing power of nature. When you're feeling sad, you can always look up to nature to heal you, to lift your spirits. But then he's also sad or sorry about the fact that even though we are also a part of nature, man is unable to follow nature's peaceful example. So this is as far as the introduction to the poem is concerned. Now we will do the poem. I'll try to explain the poem line by line. This is how the poem begins. I heard 1,000 blended notes. So the poem, it begins with the unnamed speaker, most likely the poet himself, recalling how he heard 1,000 blended notes. Blended means combined, mixed, intertwined. And it is the intertwined or mixed or blended notes of the bird's song. So you have to remember that he is with nature now, and he's reclining, he's lying down, enjoying the beauty of nature. He's in a lovely grove, and he can hear the blended musical notes. So it is almost like an orchestra. The musicians work together, where the musicians work together to blend their music and also to create songs out of many notes. The poet's philosophy is all about this harmony, this feeling of harmony or unity that connects all objects of nature. Everything is connected, and he makes use of these words. He makes use of the images of blending, intertwining, and all that to suggest that all objects of nature are connected. They are all interconnected. I heard 1,000 blended notes, while in a grove I sate reclined. That is the poet or the speaker is reclining in the grove, and he wants to enjoy the beauty and the music of nature. So this is an idyllic picture of absolute happiness. But then suddenly, look at the next line. In that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. So just when you think that the poet is in a very happy and pleasant mood, you are reminded that this is also the kind of mood in which happy thoughts remind you of sad ones. So it is quite unusual. When you're happy. But the poet says that even in his happiness, he is reminded of sad thoughts. He has sad thoughts in his mind, which means that the happiness the poet was experiencing was interspersed with sad thoughts. And this pleasant mood leads him, it's actually that the pleasant mood leads him to deeper thoughts and a more serious contemplation, particularly associated with the nature of mankind and what has happened, what has become of the human soul and spirit. He mourns over what man has done to himself in the face of nature, which includes all of us. Man is also a part of nature. So even though he feels happy, he is also suddenly reminded of certain unpleasant things, and we'll see what these the sad thoughts are. To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran. The poet feels that his soul is connected to all the beautiful creatures of nature, all beautiful objects. Everything is connected. Nature is one, and we are all part of it. The poet seems to imply that all forms of nature possess the soul. It is not just humans or the living things that possess soul, but Wordsworth believed that even the inanimate objects of nature had the soul, and it is the existence of soul that connects all the objects of nature, that connects each object to the objects to each other. And the poet also speaks of a link, a connection with which nature connects its own soul to the beauteous objects. So, not only is everything in nature inherently beautiful and joyful, but then everything else also shares that joy, and sharing is all part of the happiness. The next line, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. So initially the poem opens on a happy note. The poet talks about how happy he was feeling, listening to the blended music of nature, of birds, and then suddenly he says that he was reminded of he had sad thoughts also, and now he explains what it is that grieved his heart, that what made him unhappy. He says that I felt terribly sad. Why did he feel sad? When he thought about what man had done to himself. Nature had been kind to man. It is man who has not been kind to himself. What has he done to himself? So the second quatrain moves briefly from nature to ruminate on the misery that humans have caused each other. So now he is talking about what man has done to himself, why he has made himself unhappy and miserable. Through primrose tufts in that green bower, the periwinkle trailed its reeds, and it is faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. Primrose and periwinkle, they are all names of flowers. So periwinkles grow among bunches of primroses, under green trees. Green bower is a green tree. And it is the poet's belief that all flowers, they find happiness in the very air that they breathe. So it is possible to find happiness everywhere. It is only the humans who are unable to find happiness. So look at these flowers, these little flowers. They seem to be so happy. And do they have any reason to be happy? They seem to be even enjoying the very fact that they are alive, the very fact that they are able to breathe, the very air they are breathing seems to make them happy. So in this quatrain, we can see nature, perceive nature as imbued with life. In fact, throughout the poem, lines written in early spring, Wordsworth, he does his best to create the idea of a living, breathing world that is so similar to humanity. They are also like humans. You might think that a flower has no life, or they are just inanimate objects, they cannot feel anything, but Wordsworth seems to believe that even the smallest of flowers, they can also feel. They also have that life, which is quite similar to that of humans. And what you see here is personification. Wordsworth is personifying nature. He is also personifying the objects of nature. What is personification? Personification, that is, you speak about other objects. It could both animate and inanimate objects as having life. You talk about them as if they are people, as if they are persons. So that is a figure of speech that you come across in poems. Personification is a figure of speech you come across in poems, and it is a figure of speech where you talk about animate or inanimate objects as persons, and that is personification. So here in these lines, he says that all these little flowers, they possess a single joyful consciousness, just like humans. You would think that only we have life, only we have feeling, only we have emotions. But Wordsworth preferred to believe that even the flowers, they had this power to feel and even experience happiness, and they don't need anything more than, they can draw happiness even from the very air that they breathe. And from flowers, he moves on to living things. The birds around me hopped and played. Their thoughts I cannot measure. That is, he said, he looks around. You have to remember that the speaker, he is lying in a lovely grove and he is looking around and enjoying the sights. And he enjoys the beauty of flowers, and now he turns around and he spots birds jumping about playfully around him. And then he says that he can see the birds, happily jumping about. But then he cannot read their thoughts. Why are they so happy? They seem to be very happy. The poet says that I cannot read their minds, but all I know is they are happily jumping about. But the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. The poet says that I may not be able to measure, I may not be able to figure out the reason for their happiness, but I know that I can understand that even the small movements they make, the least motion referring to the tiny movements these birds are making, so even that is giving them a lot of happiness, that is giving them immense pleasure. But humans, nothing is enough for you, isn't it? You're always craving for more and more. Man is greedy, but look at the objects of nature, look at these birds, look at these flowers. They don't really need much to make them happy. Even the small things, the flower is happy about the air it breathes, and the bird, they are happy to even just move around. So even that tiny movement is enough to make them feel happy. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air. The budding branches, the branches filled with flower buds, they are spread out, and they look like the spread out branches, they resemble the shape of an open fan. You have that, the foldable fan. So now this looks like a fan, an open fan. And why do you open a fan? To get breeze, isn't it? To catch the breeze. So the budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air. That is, they are like the open fan, and you open the fan to catch the breeze. So it's the shape of the budding twigs that is being compared to the fan, open fan. And you have the figure of speech metaphor here. It is not exactly a comparison. Simile is a figure of speech when you say that something is like something else. But metaphor, here we have the poet uses metaphor, that is spread out their fan. It is not actually the fan. He does not say that the budding twigs, when they spread out, he does not say that they look like the fan. He just says that the twigs spread out their fan, and that is metaphor. So the budding branches, they are spread out and resemble the fans opening to catch the breeze. And I must think, do all I can, that there was pleasure there. That is, I have every reason to believe that they were taking pleasure in life. The sheer fact that they were all alive, that was enough to give them happiness. And I must think, do all I can, that there was pleasure there. There was happiness there. I have every reason to believe. I may not know the reason why they are happy. He just assumes that it might have been the air that was giving the flowers happiness. It must have been the tiny movements that made the birds happy. So whatever the reasons might be, Wordsworth says that I have every reason. I know for a fact that these tiny objects of nature, they were all feeling happy about just staying alive, about life. And if this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, the poet, he believes that this natural joy, how is it that these birds and these flowers are able to experience so much happiness? It can only be sent from the heaven, isn't it? Only God can give you so much of happiness. So the poet believes that it is as part of the divine plan that all of these entities seem to be experiencing the same kind of happiness. They all seem to be happy. And how can they all be equally happy? So if this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, so it must definitely be part of some holy plan that all objects of nature should feel happy. So these lines embody Wordsworth's principal philosophy, the pantheistic philosophy, which is the assertion of an identity between God and nature. Pantheism is the view, is a belief that God is nature or the physical universe. That is, they are essentially the same thing. God and nature are one and the same. And towards the end he says, have I not reason to lament? So earlier he says that I have every reason to believe that these tiny objects of nature are happy. The same way, towards the end of the poem, the poet says, he's asking this question, have I not reason to lament? That is, feel sad, to feel sorry. That is, he's asking the reader, can you blame me if I say that what man has made of man? So can you blame me if I tell you that I have every reason to feel sorry or to feel sad? Doesn't it make any sense to you that I should be sad? Now, why do you think that I should stay happy when all the other objects of nature, I have every reason to feel sad also? Lament is feeling sad, feeling sorry. And what am I sad about? What man has made of man. This is what is making the poet sad. What has humanity done to itself? Despite the best efforts made by nature, the poet's spirits are still low. Wordsworth had always great faith in the healing power of nature. Even when you are sad, you only need to turn to nature and then you will feel happy. But in this poem, towards the end, the concluding lines, in fact the poem ends on a rather pessimistic note. He says that when everything else that is untouched by the miseries of humanity, he speaks about birds, he speaks about flowers, he speaks about branches, they all seem very happy. And it is only man who is still unhappy. So everything that is untouched, everything else is untouched by human misery. They are all, living on happily. But man alone is left behind to experience the misery of the human world. It is only man who is always unhappy. And the poem, lines written in early spring, ends with this lament or a complaint. The poet is complaining, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? So this serious complaint that Wordsworth has about man is that he has done something really seriously wrong to himself. And what is this wrong that man has committed? And humans, the problem is that humanity has failed to imitate, to be like nature, to be like nature's model of interconnectivity and joy. That is, though the speaker, he feels that nature has made this connection between the human soul and the natural world, he feels that man has betrayed God. Man has betrayed that divine connection, even though he was also a part of that, he was also one of the links. But then he betrayed it. He just broke away from nature's holy plan. And what was nature's holy plan? To keep everything happy. Even little birds, small flowers, they can be happy, and they are happy because this is all part of nature's divine plan or holy plan. But even though man is also, just like the flower and the bird and all the other objects of nature, man is also a part of it. But what happened to man was they have severed, cut off the connection. And it was it's not just an emotional or spiritual, it was an emotional and also the spiritual connection that man had with nature. He decided to cut it off, and for that and thereby he has brought a lot of misery to himself, and therefore he does not have anybody else to blame for his miserable state. If he is not able to be happy like the other objects of nature, he has nobody but himself to blame for that. In other words, it is the baser emotions. Man has always been, selfish and self-centered and cruel and callous. So these are, the features that characterize humanity or mankind. And the poet argues that when humans are part of nature, they do not seem to recognize it. You don't seem to think of yourself as you've separated yourself from nature. And you don't think, you've forgotten that you are also a part of it. And in separating ourselves from both the natural world and also from each other, mankind has lost his connection to that happiness, which would have been your birthright, which would have been nature's original plan, the divine plan. So this is as far as the analysis or the interpretation of the lines are concerned. Now, talking about the structure of the poem, this poem, it is a 6-stanza poem, and each of the stanzas is separated into sets of 4 lines. These sets, the 4-line sets, are called quatrains. And the quatrains, they follow a simple and most consistent rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, changing end sounds from stanza to stanza. So there are a few moments in which the rhymes are closer to half rhymes than full, like notes and thoughts. The vowel sound is not the same. Note, thought. Can you notice that the difference in the first stanza? But otherwise, it follows a somewhat simple rhyme pattern. See, look at the first lines. Notes, thoughts, reclined, mind, link, think, ran, man, bower, flower, wreath, wreaths, breathes, played, made, measure, pleasure, fan, can, air, there, scent, lament, plan, man. This is the rhyme scheme. And about the literary devices, I remember mentioning some of them, like personification, metaphor. In fact, Wordsworth makes use of several literary devices in lines written in early spring. Imagery is perhaps the most important technique at work in the poem. The poet vividly describes the landscape that he is seeing and enjoying. So he has created the images. You can visualize, as you read the poem, you can visualize, you can see them as images in your mind. So that is imagery. The poet or the speaker lying in a lovely grove, and he can see the flowers around him, the little birds hopping around, then the music that he can hear. So this is called imagery. And we have already discussed the rhyme scheme. Now about the context, the context in which the poem was written. He, at the time of writing the poem, the French Revolution was going on, and Wordsworth was one of the supporters of the French Revolution, and he had concerns about the way civilization was going on. And he was stunned by the cruelty and the callousness of the French society. In fact, many romantic writers, they wrote mainly to take back the world from the brink it had been pushed to during the age of the so-called age of enlightenment. Lines written in early spring is one such poem. He wrote this poem during one of his walks near the village of Alford. He was an ardent walker, and many of his poems were composed during these walks, and he wrote about the scenery which he witnessed during his walks. Mm. The poem, it is written on the theme. Now, if you are asked to write about the theme of the poem, you can say that the themes treated in the poem are nature, spirituality, and also peace. In fact, in the preface to the lyrical ballads, Wordsworth wrote that he tried to choose the low and rustic life for his poetic themes, because he believed that the essential passions of the heart can find a better soil in which they can attain their maturity and are less under restraint, and speak a plainer and more emphatic language. That is according to Wordsworth, when the theme is simple. So the poem, lines written in early spring, also deals with a very simple theme. And he says that he believed that when the theme is simple, the language must also be simple. And Wordsworth's choice of poetic theme is actually a direct outcome of his democratic preference for simple life and simple people. He believed that the poet is a person with a mission. He has a more lively sensibility and a greater knowledge of human nature. He has a more comprehensive soul than ordinary humans. And this is more, whatever he has said about poet is more true about himself than about anybody else. So the world of nature that he presents in the poem it's a beautiful world, but at the same time he also wants to draw the attention of the readers to what man has done. And by presenting the natural world of birds and flowers, he conjures a picture of calm agreement and pleasure, but that is contrasted with the failure of mankind to live up to such a model. So, this is what the poem is about. So, I hope you have understood the poem. Do read it yourself and do try to analyze it in your own way. So, thank you for listening patiently, and I hope you do your exams very well. All the best to all of you. Thank you so much.